What's going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are discussing Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 5, titled Back to the Suture. Man, I'm going to be honest with you all, I'm struggling at this point in the season, but there are some good things that we'll be discussing, as well as some bad things about this episode, so let's not waste any time and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We open this week's episode once again with a flashback. 3 years ago at the funeral of Rick Flag Jr., and the air is thick with grief. We see John Economos paying his last respects, but our focus quickly shifts to Harcourt sitting alone staring at the casket of her one true friend. Behind her sits Rick Flag Sr., broken by his loss. He leans forward and starts mentioning how utterly embarrassing it was sending his son overseas not to fight some honorable war, but instead fight a gigantic alien starfish with a bunch of clowns by his side. It's kind of ironic hearing Rick Flag Sr. say that, considering the mission that he found himself on in Creature Commando Season 1, which included a team that I love, but it had a team with a dead corpse, a robot, and a weasel. Now Flag has regrets about the life they've chosen, as he knows Harcourt can't tell him who pulled the trigger, but he still asks. He tells her that his son loved her despite his relationships with other women, and yes, they were friends, but there was definitely something more. And you can tell that Harcourt shares a similar sentiment about Rick Flag Jr. Now, Rick Flag Sr. tells her that she's family now and that his son would have wanted that and he'll always look out for her. You know, seeing this yet again continues to be a highlight for me, and that's Harcourt's emotional arc. I really found this opening to be an incredibly tender and vulnerable moment for a usually tough character in both Harcourt and Rick Flag Sr. Now, before Rick walks away, we get a call back to what Rick said to her in last week's episode as she promises,
"The person who did this, that person, they'll pay. I'll make sure of it."
Thanks, kid.
Again, I just found this scene to be phenomenal. It wasn't used as exposition, there's raw emotions in the scene, and it just deepens the history and the motivations of these characters. You feel the profound loss of Rick Flag Jr. for both his father and Harcourt, which is driving her present-day struggles with being friends with the men who killed her true friend. Now back to present day, we are in the park from last episode where Harcourt is patiently waiting for Peacemaker with Argus agents lurking. Judo Master is given orders to take the shot as Peacemaker arrives, but Peacemaker is smart and he's not just walking in freely or unaware of his surroundings. We watch as he makes sure to have no clear shots, no sniper looking down at him. I really found this scene to be hilarious as we watch Peacemaker playing frisbee with dogs, kicking a soccer ball around with the little kids, giving random strangers hugs, all to avoid being a target. Again, I found this to be hilarious, but it's also a smart reminder that underneath all the goofiness, Peacemaker is a highly trained killer and knows how to navigate through these type of situations. Chris makes it to Harcourt and sits down, and without missing a beat, he rips off her mic, as he sits where he's not in direct line of sight. Now, I'm glad to be proven wrong because last week I thought Harcourt might have sold Chris out. Turns out she gave Peacemaker a secret code word, a warning to not come to the park because it's a setup, as she wants him to leave immediately. But we see Peacemaker isn't budging. Chris is here for one thing. He needs to know if whatever happened on this mysterious boat trip meant anything to Harcourt. Now, as the Argus agents close in, Peacemaker doesn't care. He presses her on an answer, as she gives it to him, and it's a cold, hard no. It didn't mean anything, as she blames it on the alcohol and wished that it never happened. Now Peacemaker asks if it has anything to do with Rick Flag Jr., as Harcourt tells him that they were never going to be anything because, again, he killed her one and true only friend. Now before he can fully process her answer and respond, Argus agents rush in on him. Now Peacemaker snaps into action, breaking one of the agents' hand, and he uses him as an actual shield. Now here's where we get a nice little comic reference for Bardot, who draws her gun on Peacemaker. She has a fatal shot that she could take on him as she awaits for Rick Flag Sr.'s orders. But here's where we get the cool part. We see she's ran a probability test on Chris' next move, and it's all seen from her POV within her eye, giving her stats on her actual shot. This was a fantastic comic book reference confirming her being turned into a cyborg by OMAC in the comics. Now Flag gives her the clear and Bardot is about to take the shot, but Harcourt runs in, tackling Peacemaker. He thinks that she's attacking him, but in reality she's just saved his life, as Bardot would have killed him. Now Harcourt quickly chokes him out, much to Rick Flag Sr.'s approval. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Adrian and Ads are outside. Ads gets a call about her security ad. It starts off promising and she's so excited this could be her first client. But as the conversation goes on, the questions get weirder, but still she confirms an appointment for the next evening. Now her excitement is instantly deflated when Adrian, with a deadpan expression, explains what the client meant by Greek over the phone and its meaning in prostitution. Yeah, that's not the type of security that Adebayo was looking for. Poor ads. And that poor ads has two meanings for me here. One being the obvious disappointment that her business has yet to take off. But secondly, her whole presence in this season so far has been reduced to nothing but an unhappy relationship and this security gig, and now she has a sex joke. Now in the woods, Red Wild is still on the hunt for Eagly as he poisons a rat for bait. Now we watch as a tiny fox takes the bait instead and sadly dies. Now Red, completely unbothered, gets out the big gun to take out Eagly. More on that here in a second. Now back at Argus HQ, Bardot confronts Harcourt about getting in her way. As we watch as Peacemaker is now in Argus' possession, he's handcuffed and he's led past John as he gives him a casual hey. Now in the break room, John and Harcourt have a conversation about what happened at the park. And it's here that we get the confirmation that Bardot is indeed a cyborg.
Cyborg.
Yeah, part robot. She was in a plane crash, all crushed up, and Argus replaced half her body with machinery.
Now here's where we see Harcourt is afraid that Rick Flag Sr. will make Peacemaker disappear and kill him, fueled by the revenge for his son. Now Harcourt wants John to book him, so it's not easy to make him vanish without a trace. Now Economos is afraid of losing his job, but he eventually agrees. Now here we get a moment that I've been waiting for all season, and that's Rick Flag Sr. coming face to face with Peacemaker. As Flag gives orders to remove Peacemaker's handcuffs, to close the shades, and turn off the camera, and everyone leaves the room, making it just between these two men. We watch as Peacemaker apologizes to Rick Flag and tells him that he admired his son and he was caught in a very dark place in the world when he killed Rick Flag Jr. But apologies aren't enough, as Rick Flag Sr. starts to beat the absolute shit out of Peacemaker. He wants Peacemaker to fight back, almost begging him to, but Peacemaker refuses, taking every single punch. Meanwhile, Economos manages to book Chris on the record, as Bardot bursts in and tells Rick Flag Sr. that Chris has been booked. Now, due to protocol, because Chris is officially booked on the records, Rick Flag Sr. decides to let him go, which to me made absolutely no sense. In my mind, these rules and procedures and protocols are thrown out the window when you live in a world with gods and monsters and aliens, and you know you have a known criminal and an elite killer in your possession who also has access to a quantum chamber that could be world-threatening. And you have to let him go because of some technicality? I call BS on this ridiculous logic and the writing in this scene. Now back to the scene, we watch as Adebayo and Adrian arrive to pick up their bruised and battered friend. But as they drive off, we see Judo Master is tasked to follow them by Rick Flag Sr. I don't know, man. I'm still struggling with the idea that if Peacemaker is such a threat to the security of the world, or as Flag says later in the episode, the security of the United States, why isn't there more intel or more of a need of maybe other superheroes? Like, why isn't the Justice Gang on this case? Like, why aren't they being told to go in to take down Peacemaker? Also, Rick Flag Sr. does something later in this episode that also pissed me off that we'll talk about. But again, I'm just thinking that the stakes that the show thinks it has really doesn't exist. Now, I couldn't make this out entirely, but on Rick Flag Sr.'s computer, we see that there's a detailed report about an RSL, repulsive spatial looping, in reference to a trial with space and time and a quantum analysis. Now, this could just be a report that he's making about the quantum unfolding chamber, giving it off to like other people in the US government, or this could be that this is saying that they're doing some type of experiments, or that Argus wants to do experiments, and this connects to the greater DC universe. Meanwhile, Rick, despite beating the hell out of Peacemaker, he assures Bardot that his main objective is to protect the United States and that he allowed Harcourt to save him. And that way, eventually, it would lead them to finding the quantum unfolding chamber. Now, Bardot was impressed by Flag's thinking, and there seems to be some type of romantic tension between the two. As we know, Rick Flag Sr. is no stranger to getting busy with the ladies. Creature Commando showed us that. Now back in the car, Peacemaker didn't see what Harcourt did as saving him, but instead he feels like she betrayed him to get her job back and that John Economos was the only one looking out for him and saved his life. As Peacemaker says that he's done with it all, hinting at him wanting to go back to the other dimension permanently. Now they return to the cabin to drop off Peacemaker, and during all this we see Eagly is now ganged up. Red Wild mistakenly kills an eagle thinking it was Eagly, but it's actually a decoy, and the real Eagly leads a group of vengeful eagles in a deadly attack and ultimately killing him. Now this might be a hot take, but the whole Red Wild versus Eagly plot just was dumb to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad Eagly is safe and he killed him, but you're telling me that James Gunn was more interested in giving this unnecessary plot to an eagle versus fleshing out ads more or giving Adrian more to do? Again, shout out to Eagly handling his business, but come on. Now, as the dust settles, we see Peacemaker make his decision as we see him writing a letter to his friends saying goodbye. Now outside, Judo Master calls in for backup as we see Peacemaker activates the quantum bag and enters the chamber. Not knowing what to do next, we see Judo Master writes a note letting them know that he went after Peacemaker in the chamber. Now earlier I had mentioned Rick Flag Sr. pissed me off in the episode, and what I meant by that is the way he's handling the situation. We see him laughing and joking and flirting with Bardot at the end of the episode, and I'm just thinking to myself, he's just a terrible director for Argus. There's no way in hell that if Waller was still the director of Argus, that Peacemaker would still be alive. She wouldn't be flirting with her co-workers. She would have had Deadshot or Bloodsport come in to take him out. And I just think that Rick Flag Sr., I like him as a character, but he, again, is a terrible director for Argus. And honestly, the handling of Argus as a group, as an entity in the DC universe so far, their whole thing this season has been a complete joke to me. Now, Ads and Adrian arrive, but it's too late. Now, they see that Judo Master followed Peacemaker into the chamber, and they find a letter that Peacemaker wrote as they realize that he closed the portal, making it that he can't return. Now, we catch up with Chris, who's now in the other dimension, as his brother in this dimension, Keith, tells him to suit up to take on this kaiju as he's introduced to Eagly. Now we watch and hear the letter being read out that Peacemaker wrote saying goodbye to his friends. Now Peacemaker also left behind the alien dimensional device to them to turn into Argus so they can get a promotion, as we see Adrian bawling his eyes out because his best friend just left this planet. As we see our Peacemaker with Keith and Agee and Eagly taking fight in the air as they take on this kaiju. Now next morning, we see Harcourt tells Adebayo that Peacemaker was wrong about what she did, because what she did, again, saved his life. And speaking of saving, we see Harcourt takes that dimensional device and tells the others it's time to get Peacemaker back. Now in the other dimension again, on the news, we see that the top trio group has taken out the kaiju monster, which by the way also looked like the same monster from Superman. But we see Peacemaker is back at Argus' office and sees Harcourt from the other dimension, and they race towards each other in happiness. So I guess it's safe to assume that Harcourt dumped Rick Flag Jr. from this dimension. And also based on the official podcast I listened to for Peacemaker with James Gunn, it appears that his appearance in episode 3 was a one and done. We also know now that Judo Master followed him into the chamber, so it's safe to assume that he's going to be the one to blow up Chris's spot and reveal that he's from another dimension, as the 11th Street kids try to open up a portal. Now, with them not knowing which door leads to finding Chris, I would assume that we'll find them opening up different dimensional doors and seeing some crazy things, and that's where we might get some of those big cameos that James Gunn's been talking about. So overall, I mentioned my concerns last week, and unfortunately they continue in this episode. I feel like at this point we spent 5 episodes building to this point, but looking back at it, all these events we've seen so far, to me, could have been explained and handled in like 3 episodes. I just feel like Peacemaker and Harcourt and even Flag at points have been given like really good material to work with this season, but then everything else just feels either pointless or uninteresting to me. Now again, there have been some bright moments in these 5 episodes that I've enjoyed. I've mentioned it, episode 3 is the best to me in my opinion, but again, there's just a lot of unevenness in the season, a lot of uninteresting things. I don't like that the group isn't together, but look, I could be changing my tone come episodes 6, 7, and 8. But the way I would equate this season so far is like a bag of potato chips. Inside is something you love, but when you open the bag, it's half of things you expected and you can't wait to get into, but then the other half is just air. But hey, that's just how I'm feeling these 5 episodes. Again, things can change in the next 3 episodes, but again, I feel like this season has been nowhere near as good as season 1. Now, before we wrap up, if you all have made it to this point in the conversation, I really appreciate y'all. Do me a favor in the comments now, put hashtag Eagly Lives. Now, if you all appreciate this breakdown, do me a favor, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on podcast, please consider hitting that like button as well as sharing this breakdown of video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about Peacemaker just as much as we do. And consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and follow me on my podcast feed. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown of Peacemaker.